Should males and females train the same way? Hi, I'm Ben Seong, head coach of Learn Australian Strength Performance, Learn ASP. Now today we're going to be discussing a really interesting topic, and that is one of gender differences in training. So really, if you are male or female, does that dictate the style of training that you adopt? I mean, when you walk into the weights room, it's very common to see a lot of the guys congregate where the dumbbells are. They'll be doing dumbbell movements, barbell movements, a lot of weighted movements. When you look at females and how they train, a lot of them would tend to congregate where the cardio equipment is. They do a lot more circuit work, but also if they do move into the weights room, they'll be doing specific movements to do with their lower half or their glutes. So looking at this example that I just gave, and probably an example that you're familiar with looking on Instagram or social media areas, is it obvious that males and females should train differently? Or really, is this all a myth? What is the science behind gender differences in training? Now today we'll run through 4 main differences between genders and understand what actually leads to a female training a certain way and a male training a certain way. And if they want to progress and break through that plateau, what can they do to their training to help them move forward? Point number 1 is the perception of that relationship between repetition and intensity. Okay, sounds really, big right here, but let me just break this down so you can understand what I mean by this statement. Intensity means the load you're lifting. Okay, now imagine if you're a client and I gave you 10 reps that you're going to perform. How would you perform that 10 reps? Typically when I train my male client, I think a lot of them would, whether it's ego boosted or whether it's strength boosted, they would try to push a weight that by 10 reps, they're completely fatigued and exhausted. That means that by rep 11 or 12, they potentially could not perform another rep. If I were to train my female clients, I think a lot of them tend to hold some back in the tank. So even though they stop at 10 reps, they potentially could have done 15, 16, 17 reps. Why? Because often, not fueled by ego, they might choose a load that is a lot lighter. So in my experience, I find that a lot of male clients overestimate themselves and a lot of female clients underestimate themselves. And this creates the perception that there is a difference with relationships between repetition and intensity. If I was designing a program for a female client, because of this point number 1, which we're talking about, I would give my female client a higher volume program. That means this allows them to have more sets within an activity itself. If I chose, let's say, a deadlift for them, I would give them 4 sets of a deadlift, and each set could be 10 reps. I understand that they will not be able to choose the right weight for that 10 reps because they often choose a lighter weight, but because it is 4 sets and that moves up a certain volume, it allows me to create the training effect that I want with them, whether it's building strength or whether it's hypertrophy, building muscle. For a male client, bear in mind that they're already choosing a weight that may over exceed what they potentially could do. So if I gave them 10 reps, they might choose a really heavy weight where the first set, they're already going all the way, hitting the wall, and that first set may be it. So by the second set, they may not even be able to hit 10. As a result of that, giving them a higher volume exercise, or volume in terms of giving them 4 sets, is probably going to destroy them. So I would tend to focus on 2 to 3 sets max per exercise, making sure that they choose the right intensity rather than overestimate themselves for that one activity. Point number 2 that we need to consider in gender differences is that a well-trained female tends to recover faster than a male. Females have a higher capacity for lactate tolerance, but also a high capacity for pain, and has a higher capacity to recover faster. So this is exactly why you would see a lot of female clients tend to gravitate towards circuit style training. This is because they can recover faster between the exercises of the circuit. Male clients tend to recover slower, and as a result of that, if you put them through a circuit, they probably won't like you too much for it. Now, the other thing that we need to look at here is understanding as well, from point number 1 and drawing a reference back to that, guys tend to overestimate their weights. So by the time they've done their first exercise, they're exhausted. To move to a second exercise, they need sufficient time to recover, recuperate, and then lift the weight again. And guys typically choose heavier loads. So the heavier the load that you choose, the longer the time you will need to recover as you are recruiting more muscles. So guys tend to take longer recovery times. Females, on the other hand, as we mentioned in point number 1, they tend to underestimate themselves, choose a lighter weight, and as a result of that, even though they hit the given number of reps, which is perhaps 10 reps, they still have a lot more in the tank. So that means they potentially could recover faster and move on from one exercise to another within the circuit itself. So how does this then apply to overcoming a training plateau? Since males gravitate towards longer rest times and females, especially well-trained females, gravitate towards shorter rest times, in order to overcome plateaus, it is very important that you take them out of their comfort zone. For a male, for example, I will push to shorten their rest times in between sets. This forces their body to recover faster, create more energy in that process, and helps them to overcome training plateaus. For a female client, the opposite or the converse is true, and that is I would increase their rest times. However, in doing so, I would teach them how to increase the load they're lifting as well, which means increasing the intensity, so much so that they are closer towards the true intensity of what I've prescribed for them within a workout itself. So if I'm giving them 10 reps, they're coming close to hitting that wall at rep 10. Okay, so that means they won't have 5-6 reps left in the tank. You know, there may be 2 reps closer or 1 rep closer towards that max, which also means that as they are recruiting more muscle to lift the heavier load, which also means if they are requiring more muscle to lift the heavier load, they will also be requiring longer rest time. Point number 3 that we need to consider is looking at training at the time of the month, the period. Really, when you look at males and females, females have a much more complex interplay of hormones between estrogen, progesterone, LH, FSH, and a whole range of different hormones that dictate their monthly cycle. The hormonal status of a male is very consistent throughout the entire month. So training for a male can be really consistent compared to that of a female. Now, if you're a female that is concerned about training around your period, you potentially would have a point down there, especially if your period is severe. A female that has a severe period would show symptoms of things like heavy menses. You will get really poor sleep around that time. You also tend to feel extremely bloated. There may be pain in the abdomen area or the lower back, which tells me that if there is pain, there's inflammation, the core function, which is the muscles that wrap around the torso to support the body, the core function is going to be compromised when this particular female will be lifting weights, which also means you potentially don't want to be lifting weights during this time. Severe menses would also encompass things like water retention. So you might feel a lot puffier during this period of time and put on maybe 2 to 3 kilos overnight based on water retention. There may also be things like irritability or even bad body odor. So these are just some of the symptoms associated with a severe or bad period. Now, if you're a female that experiences this or undergoes a bad period, then rethink your training strategy. In fact, you probably don't want to be training around your period itself. However, rather than just abstaining from training, I would look at solutions on how I could lower the severity of the period itself. A really useful strategy is to utilize a high quality and bioavailable magnesium supplement. Now, magnesium is great because it helps to suppress the stress built up around the menses time. Now, if you're looking for a high quality magnesium supplement, aim to stay away from magnesium oxides and magnesium citrates. These two types of magnesium supplements are ones where are not well absorbed in the body, and typically if you take a larger amount, it may act as a laxative. So you might want to opt for magnesiums such as magnesium glycinate, magnesium lysate, magnesium orotate. These are better, more absorbable forms of magnesium that would work really effectively to help suppress the severity of the period. Now, if your period is not that severe and there's not extensive inflammation, nor any one of the symptoms that I spoke about earlier, then your ability to train is going to be better. You will be able to work through this period of time even though you're having your menses. And point number 4, the last point, is about testosterone. Testosterone is an anabolic hormone. That means it really helps to drive muscle growth. But you realize that it is also the primary sex hormone of a male. That means it's present in a male in larger quantities, and in females, it's much smaller quantities. We're looking at about 15 times less in females. Not that testosterone is the only factor to do with muscle growth, it is just one of those factors, but nevertheless, having more testosterone would definitely favor the individual in building more muscle. So males, in that sense, having more testosterone will be able to build muscle more easily. We find that a lot of female clients, and feedback I get from them is that, oh gosh, if I look at a weight, I will get big or I will get muscly, and I don't want to do that. I think this is a false conception and understanding of how their body will react to weights itself. Now, if you want to put on lean muscle tissue, it is not that easy to put on muscle, especially if you don't have the levels of testosterone compared to that of a male. So really, if you want to put on lean muscle, you need to be looking at progressive hypertrophy, which means that from session to session, your goal is to increase the load so that you can tax your body and break that adaptation, create a new stimulus for the body. And also, what is important is considering the foods that is being consumed. So we're looking here at optimal nutrition. We're looking here at the quality and the quantity of foods, making sure that you are not justifying, that donut or that cheat meal just because you've done an extra few steps on the cardio machine or you've done that particular session itself. Eat to fuel muscle growth. Eat to prevent any sort of inflammation, so the choice of food is extremely important. I really hope that these 4 differences would have given you a better idea about gender differences in training and basically how to change your programming to make sure that you are hitting your goals. If the information was extremely helpful to you, make sure you head on to learn-asp.com, where you will see a range of seminars and courses that will give you a much better perspective of training to allow you to obtain that optimal physique. I'll see you in our next YouTube episode.